Hello, quilt artisans. My name is Shonda, and welcome to my channel, Under the Needle. So, I had just finished this table runner, right? And I really wanted to use this fabric here. So this is the table runner. I just quilted it in some diagonal lines. You know, I kept it simple. I don't really like to spend months quilting a quilt. I want to get it done in as little time as possible. So, but this isn't really about the quilting. So I had wanted to do this particular fabric here as my binding. I thought that would frame it really nicely and kind of tie it together really nicely. But I only had 12 inches of a fat quarter, or maybe 12 and a half inches of a fat quarter. And so I was going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 7 binding strips. And I could not get that at 2 1/4. I couldn't even get that at 2 inches. So I was like, I'm going to have to find something else. Well, somebody in the comments, I can't remember which one of you it was, and for that I apologize, but somebody mentioned something called an economy binding. Now, I know a lot about quilting. I be on this internet, okay? I'm on this internet. I'm on this YouTube. And I had never heard of that. Like, I've heard of a lot of things, not related to applique, paper piecing, foundation paper piecing, because I don't do those types of quilting at this particular point. So there might be lots of stuff I don't know about that. But just regular quilting, there's not a whole lot that is new to me that I haven't heard of. But I had never heard of an economy binding. So I immediately went to Google and put it in and watched some tutorials. And so basically, an economy binding is made of 1.5 inch strips. Now, I don't know that I would ever do this for a full-size quilt. Okay, this table runner, I want to say it's like 16 by 47. So 47 by 16. If this was 47 by 60, I think I would have tore my hair out. I haven't attached the binding yet because I'm kind of afraid, but I'm going to show you a little bit about like how you do this. All right, so let me get real close down here. Hopefully I'm not too close. Okay. So with an economy binding, you take your 1.5 inch strip, right? And then you fold. It's like a double fold bias, right? But it's not bias binding, but it's the same technique as a double fold bias. So you press the strip in half. I starched the heck out of this fabric first. So first you just press the strip in half. It's got so much starch on it, so it doesn't want to move. So first you press the strip in half, and then you press each side into the half, right? So I starched the heck out of this first to try to, kind of keep it together. And then after that, once I had gotten the whole strip done, I best pressed it and pressed it again to get it really firm, so that it wouldn't want to come apart. And that's why it didn't want to come apart for me, even though I was trying to get it to come apart, because it's thoroughly starched. So that's how you start it. Also, one other thing I forgot to show, because you normally, when you do binding, you do a diagonal join. I'm not going to explain what that is right now if you guys don't know what that is. But instead of doing a diagonal join, in this case you want to do a straight join, where you just, sew the two pieces together on the straight edge, instead of doing it on a diagonal. And the reason you're doing that is for one reason and one reason only, and that's because the whole point of this is that you're short on fabric, right? You don't have enough fabric. So if you don't want, so when you do that diagonal join, you're going to be wasting fabric every time. With this, I'm only losing 1/4 inch in my seam, whereas if I had done this, if I had done it on the diagonal, I would have lost a lot more fabric from each strip. So it's an economy binding, so you want to be economical in all things. Now, if you just like the look of the economy binding, but you're not actually short on fabric, then you could certainly do that diagonal join. But for me specifically, I'm doing this because I don't have enough fabric to do it any other way. So because I'm short on fabric, that's how I'm joining. So I'm going to go and start to put this on, and I'm going to bring the camera over so I can kind of show you guys how this goes. Now, I don't know how it's going to go because I've never done this before. So I'm hoping I'm successful. We shall see. Okay, now y'all can't see me right now, but I'm going to try to show you how this binding goes on. I don't normally clip my binding, but I did in this case just because I didn't want it to start moving. It's just way narrower than I'm used to. It's a little more fiddly than I'm used to, but so I just kind of wanted to be careful. But the way you do this is you actually, so after you've done it, right, and you've got your strip that's been folded in half and then folded to the middle, you open it up. Now, you're going to attach it the way you would normally attach your binding, as far as front or back. Now, I tend to attach my binding to the front, flip it to the back, and then stitch in the ditch from the front. So that is what I'm going to do here. So I want my 1/4 inch to be pretty daggone scant, okay? Because I want to give myself some room, some leeway here for when I flip it over to make sure that I hide the stitching in the back. So we're going to do this our normal way. We're going to start, it's some ways down, like not at the top of our binding. We want to leave a tail. All right, so basically we're just going to stitch it on like normal. Let's see if I can get a little closer here. It's so difficult to get this camera angle right. Okay, so basically I'm just going to, because my computer has my machine has a lock stitch, so I'm just going to do a lock stitch. You can just do a back stitch if you want. And then we're just going to sew as normal. I'm going to be a little slower than I normally am. I normally zoom my binding. I'm not going to do that in this case just because, I just don't have a lot of leeway. Like I said, there's just not much leeway here. So I'm just going to be slow and deliberate until I get to my corner, and then I'll show you how to miter the corner. Hopefully y'all can see this. I can't look at my computer while I'm sewing right now. Ooh. It's so nerve-wracking. And I can see areas where I did not quite fold it all the way to the middle, but I don't think that's going to matter in the grand scheme of things, so I'm not going to worry about it. I would fix it, but it would require me to like I'd have to wet the fabric because it's starched so well that I would have to wet the fabric in order to redo it. Now, I'm just going to sew till I'm a 1/4 inch from the edge of my quilt, and I'm just going to use the line on my foot to do that, to determine where that is. Most feet, a lot of feet, they have like a little line on them that kind of tells you where the 1/4 inch is. It's hard for me to show you on the one I'm sewing on, but let me get another foot out that's similar so you can kind of see. So like this, on this foot here, where that line is, that's where that hole starts there, that line, that's a 1/4 inch. And so I have that same line here on this foot, but it's just hard to see because of the lights and stuff. So I'm at my 1/4 inch mark. So I'm just gonna take it, I'm just gonna pivot, put my pressure foot down and sew to the edge, cut thread, and now I'm gonna go ahead and show you how to miter this. So you do it the same way. You know, you're gonna put it at 90 degrees. Oh, y'all can't, I gotta get the camera right. So you're gonna take your strip and you're gonna fold it so where it's like at a 90-degree angle. Here, it's like 90 degrees. And then once you've done that, then you're just gonna fold it back on itself. So just like normal, just like you would do any other mitered corner, and you're just gonna fold it back on itself. I know this is hard to see. You're just gonna fold it back on itself. I'm just gonna go ahead and clip this so that it doesn't move while I bring it back to the sewing machine. And then we go back to the sewing machine and then we, again, just start at the edge and stitch it down. Now, I just go from the edge here. I don't do anything special. And that's it. So I'm basically going to repeat this for 4 more corners until I get back to where I started, and then I'll do the join, where I join the binding, and then I'll show you what I'm going to do from there. I believe that glue is going to be involved because I really want this table runner to be kind of perfect-ish. So I'm going to finish attaching this to the front, and then I will come back. All right, so I did all 4 corners. I'm back here. So I just kind of want to show you how I'm going to join these 2 edges. Now, I've already done it. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I really don't remember specifically in the tutorial how they did theirs, to be honest. But I'm going to show you guys what I did. So what I did was, let me take this pin out. I basically opened this up. I opened up the strip completely. So it was folded. I opened it up completely. And then I just found where I wanted the binding to end. And I folded it back on itself. Right? And I finger pressed that there. And then I pinned it to kind of keep it in place. And then I took this edge here. It's not completely straight. When I did it, it was completely straight. Then I took this piece here and did the same thing and kind of butted it up here to this other piece. And then I finger pressed that, right? Then I took my friction pen and I drew a line where that crease was for both, right? And then I'm just going to match up the lines and then put a pin in it. And then take it to the machine and then sew on the line, right? I'm going to sew on the line and then I'm going to trim it to 1/4 inch. And then once I do that, I'm going to stitch the rest of this binding down. And after I do that, I am going to come back and I am going to, because it's really close here, y'all. It's really tight, okay? When you fold this over, it is so tight, okay? So afterwards, I'm just concerned about having enough fabric. So I think I'm going to go back, and I do this anyway for binding. I do this for all of my binding, not just economy binding. Before I stitch the other side, I always go in with an iron and I kind of pull this out and press it, right, before I do anything else. And so I'm going to do that as well. And then I'm probably going to flip this over to the back and I'm probably going to glue this in place. so that it will cover the seam in the back. Now, normally I use the same bobbin as I do on the top, but I really, since I used this turquoise thread here, I did not want that showing in the back. I went with a white thread, which normally I wouldn't do. Normally I would just use whatever I was going to use to attach the binding. I would put it in the bobbin and in the top. But in this case, I put a different color in the bobbin because I felt like if for some reason this didn't reach all the way over to cover the stitching, I would rather this white show than to have this turquoise rim all around my quilt, because the white really pretty much disappears and that turquoise would have been a bit more obvious. So that's what I chose to do. So I'm going to go back and finish this up and see how things are going. I'm going to go back and finish this up. And then when the binding is fully attached, fully secured, I'll come back and let you know what my results were and what I think about this technique. Okay, so really quickly, I did want to mention one thing. Once you sew it, right, before you trim it, just go ahead and give your quilt a pull and make sure that it's going to lie flat, right? Just make sure it's going to lie flat. And that way, if you've got it wrong, if you measured it improperly, then you can kind of go back and re-sew the seam easily. You can kind of pick those stitches out and re-sew it. If you cut it first, it becomes significantly harder to do. So that's one tip that I would give. So I've got it all done here. So I'm just going to give it a press. My iron isn't fully hot right now, so that's why it's blinking and it's not going for me because it's not all the way hot. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead and finish attaching this piece here, and then I'm going to go ahead and give it a nice iron over, and we'll see how that goes. Alright, so I just finished putting this binding on. I will never do this again. Never. Never. Well, no, I won't say never, but 99% chance I will never do this again. It took me longer to do the binding on this table runner than it takes me to do a binding for a full quilt. All right, and this is about, let's see, 16, let's see, it's 15, 30, 60, 25% of the size of a regular quilt. Like a regular lap size quilt, this is 25% of the size of a regular lap size quilt. And it took me longer to do this binding than it has ever taken me to do a binding on a full size quilt. And it does not look that great in the back. It looks okay from the front if you don't look too close, but it does not look good from the back. So I'm going to show you what my binding looks like. Okay, so especially on the back. It doesn't look too bad on the front if you don't look too closely, but it's horrendous on the back. So I got the look that I wanted. This does match this. But I think if I was to ever do something like this again, I would have to have I would have to start with at least 1.75. The 1.5 for me is a little too fiddly. I used a super narrow seam allowance on the back. It was very scant. And still, when I tried to pull this binding over to the other side, like in some places it was really good, and in some places, you know, not so much. I struggled. I did do the glue, and that's when I knew I was going to have a problem. When I was pulling it over to glue it, and I was struggling, I was like, this is going to be a problem. And I am not the most straight sewer, okay? I am not the straightest sewist. So I'm sure that when I was attaching the binding that my seam allowance wavered. Clearly it wavered, right? Because there are areas when everything's okay, and there are areas when everything is not okay. You can see here, when I started my binding, I did not hold my thread, so I have the rat's nest on the back here. I'll have to deal with that. I have a couple of spots where it didn't catch. I ended up sewing 2 needle widths from the ditch. So originally I was going to stitch in the ditch, but then when I was doing that, you can see I got off here. But when I was stitching in the ditch, or when I was gluing it to the back, I could see that I was not going to always cover the ditch in all cases. So I decided to sew 2 needle widths away from the ditch. Overall, I'm still happy with the project. I love how the quilting came out on this. Super happy with that. But this economy binding was the death of me. My mitered corners are horrible. This corner doesn't even have a miter. I was not able to miter my corners. I was not able to, it was so fiddly. It was so fiddly. And then, when I was pulling it from the back to the front, that double fold in places started to kind of loosen and come out and not stay. And it just was not pleasant. Binding is one of the things that, I don't mind binding. I don't mind it. I used to hate it. I don't really mind it now because once you're done, you're done. And I've done enough binding now to where I don't have to think about it anymore. So I used to hate binding because every time I binded, I used to have to watch a video. I don't have to do that anymore. I can just bind. So I don't mind it. This was a horror show. Okay? It was a friggin' horror show. I hated every second of it. Even just folding it in half, working with a piece that small, it just was, it was a real chore. It was a real chore. So this is my first time doing economy binding, probably my last time doing an economy binding, and I just kind of wanted to show you it in real time, because the tutorials that I looked at, they had no problem. It was just easy peasy lemon squeezy. They didn't have any difficulties. That was not my case. That was not the case for me. Maybe if I did this more often, I would get better at it. I'm sure that I would. I'm sure that over time I would get better at it. But I don't think that I want to do this enough to get better at it. So, yeah. So I'm just going to try to give you a better close-up of this binding. Now this here, this came out pretty well, this little stretch here. There are spots where I could see the potential. Just, you can see it's right next to the ditch. See, I'm hoping that'll come in. Probably not. But I did 2 needle widths from the ditch, but it's really hard to see that. I'm going to show you guys the back because that's where it's really ugly. Again, I showed you guys that spot here where I have no miter at all. You can kind of see the uneven stitching here, and that's par for the course for my binding. My back binding always looks atrocious, but I just don't care enough to make it perfect. I just don't. I would have tried for this project to get it more perfect, but this was just as good as I could get it. There's no real miter here. See, that'll come into focus. It doesn't really want to, but that's not, that's the edge of my fabric here. Instead of being in the middle, it's not properly mitered. You can see back here. It just, because I was struggling with the binding the entire time. I was sewing, pretty slow. Normally I just kind of zoom. I did not zoom here. I sewed kind of slow. And I had so much bulk in the corners that I had trouble getting the fabric to move through the machine. And yes, I have tips and tricks for that. I tried the nail file trick where you put the nail file behind the foot. I tried that, but I had to use my stiletto to just kind of force it through. Um, but yeah, it's just really kind of ugly. My intention was for this to be double-sided, but that binding is so kind of atrocious that I don't think that's going to work out, because I thought this would make a nice little double-sided, because this is more blue. This side is kind of more blue. And then this side is kind of more sea foamy-ish to me. So I kind of wanted to have both of those looks. I think it'll still work. I mean, it's just me and my family. My kids aren't going to be looking at my binding. I'm tripping here a little bit. I'm tripping. Because let's be clear. Nobody in my house is going to be magnifying glass is going to take a magnifying glass to my binding. So I'm really getting out of control here. With I think I can still use it on both sides. I'm tripping. I know I'm tripping. I can still use it on both sides. It's going to be just fine. The thing is the overall look, right? The overall look is great. And so I think we're going to be fine here, and I can stop tripping. So basically, this is ready for my table now. I think I am going to make some placemats. I'm probably going to strip piece the placemats to make my life easier. I'm going to use the remaining fabric here and cut some strips and make some placemats. And I'll probably just choose one, get a completely different piece of yardage to use as the binding for all of them. And so in retrospect, I could have, just waited to bind this and then use the same piece of fabric for the table runner and the placemats. But I'm Monday morning quarterbacking myself, right? So anyway, that is my tutorial on economy binding, and that is how I feel about it. I'm not a fan. I'm going to stick with my regular 2¼ inch binding, and I might go to 2. And like I said, if I were to ever do this economy binding again, it would definitely be on a small project, and I would want to have at least 1.75, because I feel like if I had that extra 1/4 inch, so that would give me 1/8 on each side, that would have probably given me the wiggle room that I needed to make this work. But and I couldn't quite get 1.75. I ended up cutting 8 strips. I only needed 7, but even at 7, I think they would have been 1.7 inches, and who wants to measure 1.7 inches? But looking at the back, I think even if, I had an extra 1/8, I might have been able to hide the seam better. But I don't know, guys. Let me know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next video.